Hi everyone. Just to let you know, these are some more stories that my guests have read that I'll be reading. I know I've done one of these recently, but don't worry. I'm cooking up something pretty exciting in the background. You're just gonna have to stay with me. New stuff is coming soon, and I hope you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, I think I've breathed some new life into these stories, so please like, subscribe, comment, enjoy. This happened about 10 years ago when I was working in a rural area. My work colleagues and I were staying in some kind of hostel or dormitory at the time. Right in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you literally open the front door of the hostel and there is absolutely no sign of life out there. It was a purpose-built building for us workers, to stay while we oversee the work we had in the area. In the daytime the place was busy and lively, but at night it's eerily quiet. It's just so dark out there. It kind of felt like something was watching me at night and it didn't like me. There were a couple of street lights, but nothing much else. And as an adult man, I was freaked out to take a walk by myself at night. There were no shops around, nothing to do. It really was the middle of nowhere, so all we could do was sit indoors and get drunk, which wasn't all that bad. This story takes place one night while we were drinking. We were in good spirits since it was a Friday, and it was a late one. Whenever we do these late drinking nights, I usually get some water before heading to bed to sober up. With being too drunk to drive, I had to go to the vending machine up the road a little. I didn't really want to go alone. Something about being out there really creeped me out. So I asked a colleague if he wanted to go with me. Thankfully, he said he wanted to go, so we set off on the short walk to the vending machine. I felt great. The night air was sobering me up a little and I was chatting with my coworker. We arrived at the vending machine. My colleague went ahead of me and got a drink. He cracked it open and started staring off into the distance. "What the fuck is that?" I heard him say as I was inserting coins into the machine. I scanned the dark horizon. There was nothing but trees swaying in the breeze and a few distant rice fields. The night air was full of various chirps of insects and croaks of bullfrogs. Nothing but darkness. I didn't know what my friend was talking about. "Hey!" a voice called from the darkness. My blood ran ice cold. My eyes widened, and in a panic I tried to find the owner of that voice, but I couldn't. "Hey! Hey!" It was louder now. Shivers ran up my spine. Someone else was out here with us. I looked over at my colleague, and I followed his eye line. And that's when I saw it. There was someone out there. I mean, it looked human. It looked to be male too, but something was off though. Its head was bigger than a normal human's head, and it looked to be on stilts because it was massive. It was clad in black, but had a bone white face. This huge, hulking figure just stood there motionlessly, staring at us, about 200 meters away from the vending machine. I couldn't say a word, I just stared in horror. Then my friend bolted. I had to run after him. Thankfully, we didn't have to run too far. Of course, all of our colleagues didn't believe our crazy story when we got back there. But there was some looks towards the windows, checks of locks, you know. Safety first. None of them went out that night either, in search of what we had seen. And that moment has haunted me for years. I have no idea what it wanted, but I think that if my friend and I didn't react in time, we might not be here today. There are things out there, in our world, that we have no idea about. And that's a scary thought to me. This happened one hot summer night A few years ago, I was out with a friend who we will call S on a drive. He turned to me as I was driving and he asked me if I was up for meeting some women. He pulled out his phone and started swiping through Tinder. I agreed since, it's always nice to meet women. And I had just bought a car, so I had that going for me. Plus, I had the app myself. And it was in its height of popularity, so I jumped at the chance. "You just leave matching the girls to me, man," I said. I was so full of confidence. I had a little bit of a reputation back then with the ladies. I'm not exactly proud of these days. I started swiping, and quickly reached my limit. All the while, my friend was giggling next to me. After about 20 minutes, I got a match, and as soon as I got the match, I got a message. It was amazing. The message? It was even better. "Hi, what are you up to tonight? Want to spend some time with me and my friend? I think we could have a great night. What do you say?" Well, that sent me and my friend into a frenzy. We couldn't believe our luck. I asked my friend what he thought, and he literally ripped the phone out of my hand to reply. So, two stupid men took the bait and courageously drove into the night to meet up with these two complete strangers, without knowing what hell awaited them. We sped to the agreed meeting point, but we couldn't see anyone there. Without sensing any danger, we pulled into the dark car park in the middle of nowhere, and we parked up. The meeting spot was a remote train station parking lot. There was no one around. Red flags should have been going off, but they weren't. We were blinkered by lust, I suppose. I said to S, "This is pretty weird. They said they'd be right here waiting for us." We were so desperate to meet these women that we got out of the car and took a quick scan of the area, searching for them. I said to S that I thought we might have been tricked, that it was a hoax. Then I heard someone shout, "Oi!" Me and S kept silent, and we started back to my car. "Hey you, what you here looking for?" some guy shouted. Two men started walking towards us. These guys didn't seem like law-abiding citizens at first glance. Before we knew it, they were approaching the car. I looked at S, and we didn't need to say a word. We knew these were the people who set the trap on Tinder for us. I mean, why else were we told to meet at this remote location? We scrambled back into the car as they started jogging towards us. I saw the look in their eyes, and they definitely had malicious intentions. I sped out of the parking area, and they gave chase in their own car. It was terrifying, the thought of what might happen to us if we were caught. Would we be robbed, beaten, extorted, something worse? I broke some speed limits that night, but eventually we lost them. Or maybe they just gave up. I was surprised they followed us for as long as they did. Maybe they wanted something we had. Maybe my new car. I didn't want to go anywhere close to where me and S lived, just in case those weird guys were still stalking us from an unseen distance. We kept driving and agreed to make sure we were about an hour away from our town. We stayed away from our homes until 4 a.m. that night, and then returned completely exhausted and nerve-wracked. Since that day, I've avoided dating apps. I have this ability to get tangled up with strange people once every few years or so. I'll try to explain this, but it is a weird one. I meet elderly men and women and middle-aged people. They always seem to be a little older than my parents. These people come up to me, right out of the blue, and speak to me as if I'm a close friend, and sometimes they even call me their teacher or their family member. I've never met any of them before, yet they seem to all think that they know me. I thought it was just some kind of prank at first. I thought I might even be secretly recorded for content, but no. They're adamant that they know me, and it is the strangest thing. I used to ignore these weird encounters at first and think of them as nothing but mistaken identity. But there have been too many now, and I can't ignore it anymore. and this morning I had an encounter that proved divisive. It happened when I got off the train this morning. As soon as I got onto the platform, an older man came rushing over to me. He threw his arms around me and said, "Dad, it's you!" I was used to meeting someone who thought they knew me by now, but a man older than me, probably older than my parents, calling me dad and hugging me, that was something else. I just thought to myself, this cannot be right. I froze. I mean, what would you do? I didn't know what to do. Everything around me seemed to dull. And I was just locked in that moment with a man, and it was just so weird. I snapped back to my senses and I told him that he was wrong. I wasn't his dad, but he wouldn't drop it. I told him politely at first. He had the wrong guy, and then I had to get a little firmer with him. But that only served to irritate him. "Why are you pretending to be someone else?" he asked me. I was talking fast, babbling really, because I wanted to get away from him. I told him that I had to go and there'd been a mistake and all these kind of excuses, but he wouldn't get away from me. Because our argument had heated up a little, we caught the attention of a station guard. The station guard tried to usher us out of the station, but when the old man began to get angrier and angrier, he pulled us both into some kind of train station office room. He sat us down and asked us to explain. The old man started first, and he told him what he thought was going on, and I watched the look of concern grow on the station guard's face. I guess at that point he was contemplating how to deal with him. He asked the old man why he was causing so much trouble, and the old man began to tell his story, and this is pretty much how it went. He said that his dad passed away when he was 20 years old. He said that normally when people die, their memories fade away, and only their soul can be reincarnated. However, his father claimed to possess the power to pass on his memories to another, as well as his soul. He promised that his memories and his experiences would live on through someone else, and that he would see his friends and family again, but in a different body. He said that of course no one believed his father's promise at first, but members of his family kept saying that they had seen his father here and there. He began to believe that he might see his father again, someday, and he triumphantly said that today was that day. The station staff and I must have looked so confused, because we were. The old man looked to be fully composed now. He was sure of what he was saying. He looked like a wealthy guy too, and he didn't really look like an idiot or drunk or a maniac. He just kept repeating himself over and over about reincarnation of the soul and memories, and how his dad chose me because I am of a certain generational age, and I couldn't make any sense out of it. When he finally took a break from speaking, the station guard told him that it was a simple case of mistaken identity. I thought to myself, more like a simple case of bullshit identity. The old man stared at him with a powerful look on his face, and he said, "Could you ever mistake your dad for someone else?" The station guard continued to tell him that he was wrong, but the old man wouldn't listen. It was a pain in the ass. I was trying to find the right opportunity to leave. I got up. I had had enough, and I just turned to leave, and the old man stood up with me and presented me with a business card. It had his contact information on it. He wrote his personal address on the back of the card. I took it from him as a gesture, I guess. I hoped that would be the end of it. And he grabbed my hand with both of his hands and said, "Listen, when you get your memories back, you call me, okay, Dad?" I looked at his business card, and he was high up in a company I had heard of. I went home and checked the company's website, and I saw his face right there on the homepage. Something struck a chord with me. He looked younger in that photo and kind of familiar, I guess. I sat there insanely confused for a second. Then I thought to myself, maybe I should give him a call. It only happened this morning, but if something else comes of it, I'll be back to let you know. Hi, Jay here. There have been no further posts by the original poster. One day I got a call from my boyfriend. His name's Akira. He was speaking in a frantic, desperate voice, and he had something to ask me. Hey, I've been called away on some urgent business. I need you to house sit my place for a while. Could you do that? It'll only be for about 2 days, and you can go to your classes from my place. You gotta help me. If anyone turns up, I don't think anyone will, but if anyone turns up, just say you're my girlfriend, and that's why you're there. Just say that I'm on business, and just get rid of them for me, please. Like I said, I don't think anyone will turn up, though, but, just in case. I didn't really understand the request, but I liked his place, and it was closer to college. I figured I could just veg out and watch some movies all the time, so I happily accepted. So the first evening I was there, things went smoothly. I watched 2 DVDs. It got to about 8 o'clock, and then my peaceful night was disrupted. I heard thunderous banging coming from his front door. Some voice was shouting, "Open up! I know you're in there! Come out now!" Obviously I was shocked and worried. I wondered if there was something I was doing that upset a neighbor. I was watching movies at such a low volume I doubted that this was the case. I couldn't pretend that no one was home because in Akira's entryway there's a small window, and I had left the hall light on, so clearly it looked like someone was home. Also, Akira's place was just a cheap college dorm. The door was old and I wasn't sure it would stand up to much. It looked like a door you'd see at the back of a house, like a kitchen door or something. It had many dents and scratches in it. I was scared and alone, so I had little other choice than reply. Akira's not here, I said. "Oh, you're putting on a woman's voice. Open up now, I know it's you," the voice behind the door shouted. I opened the little window I mentioned earlier, and I said, "Akira's not here, honestly." The second I finished stating those words, an arm burst through the window, and a fist grasped hold of my hair. The window was only about the size of an A4 piece of paper, but the guy who had a hold of my hair tried to pull himself through the window. Then suddenly the guy let go of me. I'm not sure if it was deliberately or accidentally. I was really scared, and I didn't know why this was happening, so I called Akira. I was hiding in the locked bathroom, terrified, waiting for him to answer his phone. When he finally picked up, he acted like he couldn't believe that happened. "Oh, what? Really? Oh, whoa, how random, right? You should just get out of there right now, I guess. Why don't you come to campus? I'm in the clubroom." Was he dumb? There was some psycho on the other side of the door, and he lived on the 3rd floor. It wasn't like I was about to walk past the guy out there without being noticed or jump out of a goddamn window. I realized that I should have just called the police instead of him. I was crying, and I was on the verge of a panic attack. I was out of options, but then I heard another voice outside. I guessed it was another one of the residents. He was shouting some pretty explicit threats, and then I heard him chase the would-be intruder off. It sounded like it was quieter out there now. I waited for a while, and then I unlocked the bathroom door. I walked towards his front door. I looked through the peephole, and there was no sign of anyone out there. I decided to make a break for it. I was still scared, but I wanted some answers, so I headed to university to find Akira. In our college, they had a room called the club room. It's like a hangout spot. I went in there, and Akira was in there with some woman I didn't know, watching TV and eating candy together. I shouted at him, "What the hell do you think you're doing, putting me in that situation?" He then proceeded to tell me the following. "Oh, hey, sorry, this is my ex-girlfriend Yumi. She's been hiding out with me in the club room because she's being chased by her ex. He's all like abusive and stuff. Her ex suspected that me and Yumi were getting together. We are so not, though. Anyway, I suspected that he might come looking for me at my place, and looks like he did. So that's why I asked you to house sit my place, so that when he turned up, he would believe that I've got a girlfriend, and nothing's going on with his ex. I guess that he would go crazy if he saw me in person." It was something like that. Sorry, it's hard for me to recall bullshit accurately. Clearly, he didn't seem to mind if the stalker ex of his ex was rough on me. Furthermore, I called him in a panic, worried for my life. And where was he? Sat, comforting, watching TV with this Yumi. I was angry, and I asked him outright, "So what, your ex is more important to you than I am?" He said something like this in response. No, it's not like that. I just wanted to comfort the person who was the most in need. You know what? For you to say something like that to me, that's just disappointing. I'm really cold. I really didn't expect that from you. His ex, Yumi, looked at him and grinned, and the prick grinned back at her. I stood there indignant, thinking of a response, but something deep down inside me said, "He's not worth it." The only response I gave him was this: "I'm done with you. We're breaking up." On the way home, I stopped by his place and left a note on his door. Akira and Yumi are at the club room at college. After that, I just went home. The next morning, I looked at my phone and there were 10 missed calls from Akira. About a month later, I heard from a mutual friend that Akira had gotten into a serious accident and was taking a break from college and was back in his hometown. And I was glad. I didn't hear anything about Yumi because I didn't know her in the first place. I'm really glad that's all behind me now. A few years back, I went to a festival in Hachioji. It was summer, and I was with 3 friends. We had a really great night out. We took in the night markets and enjoyed some street food, but it was late, and we were ready to head home. It was a hot and humid night, so we decided to pop into Starbucks. We figured it would be a great way to grab a cold drink and escape the mass of foot traffic heading towards the station. From where I sat, I could see the counter clearly. I was chatting with my friends about the festival, and in the intervals in our conversation, I naturally glanced towards the counter, as it was right there in front of me. I saw a guy wearing a long jacket stood there at the counter. He looked like he was waiting for his drink to be prepared. I think he caught my eye because he was wearing a long jacket and we were in the height of summer. I was half listening to my friends, but keeping an eye on this guy. It looked like he was talking to the woman behind the counter, preparing the drinks. I thought that maybe they were friends at first, but then I realized that the woman at the counter was ignoring the man. She just went about her work in silence and apparent ignorance of the man at the counter. I thought that looked a little weird. I wondered if he was bothering her, or even harassing her. I kept watching. I don't know why, but the guy in the jacket suddenly lunged his upper body over the counter towards the woman. He was rummaging around for something. I could hear the sound of it. I didn't know what the hell he was thinking. It looked like he was searching for something. The woman behind the counter didn't even seem to notice that anything had happened. I watched all of this unfold with an uncomfortable feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something seemed so wrong. After he rummaged around over the counter, he returned to the spot he stood in before the counter. I watched, and it still seemed like the barista didn't acknowledge his existence. He continued speaking to her, and she continued her work without hearing. I couldn't help but watch. Suddenly, the man in the long jacket turned to face me and looked me square in the eyes. He looked shocked and surprised. You know the look of someone being caught doing something they shouldn't be doing. It was like that. In that instant, something happened. Everything around me suddenly stopped. It was as if someone had hit the pause button on TV. There was a clear and audible sound. I don't know how to explain it best, but this is what it sounded like to me. It sounded like ice cubes were being dropped into a glass. You know that clanking sound of ice rolling around in a glass? That one. Then as soon as I heard that sound, all the natural diegetic sounds around me returned. As soon as I heard the sound of ice tumbling into the glass, it was as if someone had unpaused my life. I instantly looked towards the counter, as it was right in front of me. The guy in the jacket was gone. I looked at my friends. They were still talking, as if I hadn't zoned out. I asked my friends if they had seen what I had seen. Well, I asked them if they had seen someone weird by the counter, and they said that they didn't. I don't know what the hell that was, but it remains a mystery to me. I wonder why he was bothering the barista. I have seen other weird things like this in my life, but nothing recently. Nothing since that man noticed me looking at him. Did you ever have a secret base or a hideout as a kid? I think lots of kids used to build secret bases. Well, I found mine in the mountains. It was an abandoned cabin. And this experience takes place when I was in my 4th year of elementary school. I used to hang out with 2 kids from class, and it was when I was out with them that I discovered the cabin. We would always go out and play in the mountains. When we opened the door to the cabin, we saw cobwebs everywhere in there. It felt as if we had just entered a dungeon or something from a video game. We quickly realized that in the past someone must have lived there because there was furniture still there. Most of the furniture was busted up and unusable, but we were thrilled with our new discovery. It felt like it was ours, our new secret base. From that day onwards, we spent most of our time after school at our secret base. I took an old chair from my place up there, and we would bring comics and snacks. It was awesome. We wanted to keep the secret base just for ourselves. We decided that no one else from our school, or outside of the school, was allowed in. So we pooled our money together, and we bought a padlock and a latch, and we installed it on the outside of the door, and locked it whenever we left. We also installed a sliding bolt lock on the inside so that we could keep people out when we were in there. Each day at class, we would decide who would be the first person to get there, and that person would become the key holder for the day. Whoever came to the hut after that would have to use a secret signal, a special kind of knock to gain access. The secret knock was simple, I remember it, and it goes like this. 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock, pause, and a final 3 knocks. Pretty cool, huh? So, one day, one of the 2 friends and I headed out to the secret base while we waited for our 3rd friend to come along. He was held up with some after-school activity that day. After a while, my friend and I, in the cabin, heard a knock at the door. We both thought that it was our friend. I raced over to the door to unlock it and let him in, but my other friend grabbed my arm and whispered, "That's not our secret knock." A voice on the other side of the door, which kind of sounded like our friend, then said, "Hey guys, it's me. Open the door." This was followed by 3 short knocks. It was really weird because it was our friend who was running late's idea to create a secret knock, and now he wasn't using it. I said to our other friend that it must be our friend out there and he's just forgotten the knock, but then he reminded me that we had all promised never to open the door until we had heard the secret knock. We were bound by our oath to keep that door shut, and we took that very seriously. Another quick 3 knocks came at the cabin door. We stood there in silent defiance. More knocking followed. It wasn't the signal, so the door remained locked. The voice from behind the door, which sounded a little like my friend, began to get angry. "Open it," it ordered in a stern voice. We stayed silent. "Why won't you open it for me?" the voice hissed. I don't know how many times I almost went over there to open it. I was really wrestling with that idea in my head. Something deep down always persuaded me to keep my distance until I heard the correct secret knock. Something felt wrong about that situation. There was now a hammering at the door. The voice sounded less and less like my friend, and when it shouted in a booming voice its orders for us to open the door, it sounded nothing like him. We looked at one another. in the dusty old cabin with eyes that pleaded for this to be over. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. There was nothing out there, but the silence of the mountainous woods. My anxiety slowly faded. We waited a few more moments and then we unlocked the door and looked out there, and there was no one there. We left our secret base and then headed to our friend's house. When we got there, we saw his mum in the garden and we asked where he was. She said that he was ill. She had to rush to school because he was running a very high fever, and by the time she had got there, she was told he was already in an ambulance, heading for the hospital. That made us feel really weird. On the one hand, of course, we were worried about our friend, but on the other, we realized that it couldn't have possibly been him at the cabin door. After we left his house, we spoke about what happened at the cabin. We both considered ourselves very lucky that we didn't open the cabin door. My friend suggested that we probably shouldn't go back there again, and reluctantly, I agreed. Then we went our separate ways and headed home. When I got home, the sun was still up and shining. My mum wasn't home from work yet. I dropped my school bag in the lounge and grabbed a drink from the refrigerator. I was feeling pretty tired, so I laid on the sofa for a while and shut my eyes. I must have had my eyes closed for all of about 10 seconds when I heard a noise. There was a knock at the door. Our home had an intercom system, a little bit like the Ring doorbells that are popular these days. If someone pressed the doorbell, then you would see who was out there on a little monitor inside the house. So I was wondering why someone hadn't pressed the bell. But I know that some people don't always press it. So I got up and I headed for the door, and then I stopped in my tracks. Something dawned on me. I recognized that knock, and it went like this. That was our secret knock. 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock, pause, and a final 3 knocks. My head was spinning. I heard the same knock again. This was no coincidence. I could see through the frosted glass. Whoever or whatever was out there was bigger than my friends. There was a dark, hulking shadow looming in our front door. It felt like whatever was trying to get into our secret base had followed me home. The banging at the door got louder and louder, and I didn't know what to do. I called my friend, the one who was with me at the cabin, and after a few rings, he answered the phone. I said, "Hey, you won't believe this," and he said the following. What? He had said what to the exact rhythm of the secret knock. I was in shocked silence. Then another voice spoke through the phone, and it said 3 chilling words. "Open the door." That's all I can remember. I woke up and I was lying on the sofa. I wondered if it was all a dream. But I saw the phone lying on the floor. It was a corded phone. I went over and picked it up. There was no dial tone, only silence. I put it back in its cradle, and I backed away from it. The next day at school, my friend said that he had heard someone knocking at the door, which sounded like our secret knock. I wonder if something from the mountains followed us. Maybe something happened in that cabin, and whatever it is, it still lives out there in the mountains. I heard stories of afflicted families, disease-ridden families, being sent away to live in the mountains, away from society and people, to prevent the spread of disease in towns. I wonder if that had anything to do with that cabin. Whenever I see a full moon, it reminds me of a night when I was in my 2nd year of high school. For some reason still unknown to me to this day, my high school prohibited commuting by bicycle. The reason was so vague I barely remember it. But it was something to do with promoting a healthy mind, something about walking, healthy mind, I don't know. Anyway, I lived just over a mile away from school, so it would always take a long time to walk to school from where I lived. I think it was about 2 weeks before summer vacation when this happened. I was forced to stay late at school. We had these club activities after class, and it seems like no one wanted to go home that day. Eventually, we all decided to leave, and it was really dark out. I think it must have been about 9 p.m. My friends and I left school exhausted. This wasn't anything new, though. We often enjoyed staying late, just not that late. We would all walk together, but en route our numbers would shrink. All my friends lived closer to school than I did, so I would always be the last one standing at around the halfway point. I would walk the rest of the way home alone. I would get off the main roads and walk the back roads. I'd go through dark alleyways and unlit streets in an attempt to shorten my walk home alone. Back then, my family and I were living out in the sticks, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. On the main road, the streets were bright, and there were plenty of cars passing along, but these back roads, they were very dark and quiet. There were open fields either side of the roads, and it was pretty creepy walking there at night. That night in particular was creepy. I felt a strange sense that something was wrong. I don't know if it was a kind of weak premonition, but I was suddenly aware of my surroundings, and it felt like something was different. I had walked those roads for a few years, but I had never had a feeling like that before. It was eerily quiet. A gentle breeze was blowing, and the moon was full. It was a cloudless night, and I could see my surroundings well. Then suddenly, I was made aware of the source of my discomfort. I looked down at the road, and there was another shadow cast by the moonlight besides my own. I felt chills race up my spine. Since when was there someone walking behind me, and how long have they been there? I asked my panicked mind. It was really scary. I didn't know what to do, but then I remembered something. I knew if I kept walking my route home, and I turned the next corner, I would approach a curved mirror on a pole. You know those mirrors that you sometimes see by the side of the road so that drivers can see oncoming traffic approaching? One of those. So I kept my composure. I turned the corner and I was horrified by what I saw in the curved mirror. There was a man behind me, dressed in black, wearing a white mask and a hat. It was truly disturbing to see someone dressed in that kind of getup out here, late at night. I caught a glimpse of something else though. He was holding something in his hand. It appeared to be a hammer. Not a regular household hammer. It looked more like he had a sledgehammer. Like he had cut down the handle and made it handheld size. Chillingly, he was walking the same pace as me, mirroring my speed exactly, only he was a few yards behind me. When my right foot hit the road, so did his. I could tell that this wasn't the first time he had followed someone. The moment I saw him, I felt like screaming. But I thought that if I screamed, I'd be dead. I was too far from home to attempt to outrun him. Plus, I was pretty exhausted from playing basketball all night at school. I made a decision. I was going to run up to the next house I saw with the lights on. I passed 2 or 3 dark houses, utterly terrified, with each step that it could be my last. Then I finally saw a house with some light. I walked right up to this stranger's house and opened the door and loudly said, "I'm home." I walked right in and shut the door. I had to. I was running out of options. There was a family there watching TV in the lounge, and they looked so puzzled, but I managed to explain myself, and I asked them to call the police and my parents. We looked out of the window, but Hammer Guy was long gone. It was a traumatic experience. I tried my best to give a description of the man, but like I said, he was wearing a mask and a hat. All I could have given them was height, maybe weight, and it would have just have been an approximation. Something good did come of this, I guess. My school lifted their pointless ban of commuting to school on bikes. So I cycled to and from school from that day forward, and I refused to stay so late. One thing that plays on my mind is, I wonder what would have happened if the door was locked on the house I approached. Would I still be here today? Maybe not. This happened in June a few years ago. I was really busy at work and feeling as if every day was the same as the last. Each week I did the same things, and I barely noticed when the months changed. One night I was heading home after work when I got a call on my mobile phone. I didn't recognize that number. I answered it anyway, and it was a good friend of mine who I met at college. I was kind of surprised. I hadn't heard from him for about 10 years. At university, we were basically inseparable though. We would get dinner and drink always. Like I said, I was surprised to be hearing from him after so long. But after a few minutes of speaking to him, it was like we were right back in the old days. We were talking for a while, and then he asked me if I would be down to go meet him for dinner and some drinks. I said of course I would be down for that. We set it up to meet at the weekend as we both didn't have to work. To be honest with you, it was just what I needed. I guess I didn't know at the time, but I was close to burning out, and that call really turned my week around. We said we would meet up outside of a train station halfway between my place and his. I was there at the right time, but I guessed he was running late or something because I couldn't find him anywhere. After a little while, some guy was waving in my direction. I was sure it wasn't my friend because he looked nothing like that guy, and I guessed that he might be waving at someone else. About a minute passed and he was still waving at me. He actually came jogging over towards me. When he got closer, I realized that it was, in fact, my friend from college. He said to me, "Hey man, I was waiting over there. I was on time." Honestly, he looked so different that there was no way I would have known it was him if he didn't come right up to me. 10 years had passed and we hadn't seen one another, so I should have guessed that we wouldn't look like the people we were at college. We headed into the restaurant, and I realized that despite his looks changing, he was still the same person inside. By that, I meant he really hadn't changed much since college. He was hitting the alcohol just like we used to, and to begin with, it was kind of tough for me to keep up with him. When we started talking about old times, I was able to catch up with the drinks. We spent 2 hours chatting, drinking. It was just the pick-me-up I needed. And then he turned to me and said, "I was really glad to meet you and have a couple of drinks with you tonight. Thanks for coming, man. It was really nice reconnecting with you again." I was grabbing onto his shoulder, and I think I said something along the lines of, "What are you saying? We gotta do this again." Then he said something completely unexpected. "Well, actually, I don't think that that's gonna be possible, pal. I killed someone, and I'm on the wanted list, and I'm on the run. And I'm tired of running though, man. So tired. I can't even sleep because the person I killed's face appears in my dreams. I can't stand this pain. I'm thinking the only way to end it is to turn myself in." While I was thinking all this over, you popped up in my head. And I thought, who would I like to see one last time before I'm sent away? I guess you could say, this is like my last wish. His confession had me stunned into silence. It was just the way he threw it out there. Since I had alcohol on board, I asked him about who he killed. He said it was a woman. It was a stabbing. It was his girlfriend, and he had found out she had been cheating with another man. He said the red mist descended and he couldn't remember much after that. But when he came to his senses, he saw what he had done to her. He told me about life on the run. He said he had to completely change everything he could about his appearance. Now I get why I didn't really recognize him. I thought this could have been an elaborate joke or prank, but when we left the restaurant, I watched as he walked right up to a police officer by the station. I watched from a distance with interest. In less than 10 minutes, a police car arrived with sirens blaring, and he got in. When I got home, I looked into his claims and found that what he said he did actually happened. He described the murder to me that night, and I was pretty certain it was him who did it after I read about the case. He should be in prison for what he did, and I can't ever forgive him for that. But I feel a little conflicted. It was a strange yet somehow sentimental experience. Lately I've been hearing a voice outside my window late at night. I can only make out a few words. It mutters, "Give it back." And then she calls out a name and asks for this person to give whatever it is back. The voice is definitely female, and it's loud enough to wake me up if I have my window open. I can usually hear this voice between 1 and 3 a.m., and between 1 and 4 times a week. Sometimes it's really loud, and other times it's as loud as the usual street noise. Unless I'm in a deep sleep, I will always wake up when I hear it. After about 2 weeks, I was feeling a little sleep deprived and not my usual self. The window is close to my bed, and whenever I heard that voice, I looked out there often. But I could never see anyone. I thought that I could have been hearing things. I even thought I could have been having bad dreams. But one night I heard someone else react to the voice. There's a pretty crazy dude in my neighborhood, and he lives diagonally across from my place, and I heard him shout out a few times for whoever it was to shut up. A few nights later, I was out with a good friend of mine, drinking and heading home pretty drunk. I lived just off of the main street and down an alleyway. To get to my place, you have to follow the curve of the alleyway, and then you come out in my little neighborhood. As soon as I came out of the alley, I saw a woman loitering by my house. She was holding a box under her arm. It was about the size of a B5 or A4 piece of paper. I could see her papers all bundled up in there. It was her voice that I had been hearing. She was muttering right in front of me for someone to give something back to her. I was freaked out by her. That, coupled with being sleep deprived, created a weird cocktail of fear. She wasn't facing me, and I wasn't sure if she realized I was there or not. I used this opportunity to quietly call the police. I hoped that this would be the end of me getting woken up at night so often now. 2 officers arrived pretty quickly, and they took the woman away. Who went kicking and screaming, by the way. She sounded possessed. I got a little scared. I mean, I'm a single woman living alone, and I didn't want this crazy person to know that I was the one who called the police. I didn't want to be a target. So when the officers took my statement, I said to them I wanted my details to remain anonymous, and for any information they had to retain on me to be kept private. The officer called later to say that the woman was being kept in custody and for me not to worry. Now, here's the scary part of this experience. It was about 2 a.m. when I got a call back from the officer. About 5 minutes later, I heard something outside. A female voice was muttering, "Give it back." She then called out a name and asked for this person to give whatever it is back. Instantly, I felt really frightened. But then I thought, oh God, I really am hearing things. You know, auditory hallucinations. But when I heard the voice coming from the other side of my front door for the first time, I knew it was real. I stood there frightened and unable to move. Then, the banging started. I backed away from the door and I grabbed my phone. I called the officer who had just called me, and he told me not to worry. I frantically told him that there was someone at the door trying to get in. He came back to search for the would-be intruder and said that he couldn't find anyone in the area. He told me to keep all my doors shut and locked and try to calm myself down. I was pretty hysterical at that point. He said he would be back later to patrol the area just in case. Then about 10 minutes after he left, I heard that dreadful voice from outside calling for someone to give something back to her. She was so much louder this time. I didn't want to call the cops again, for fear that this could all be in my head. I didn't want to seem crazy. I really didn't think I was. It all seemed very real to me. I didn't want to keep filling out reports every night. Confident that the doors and the windows were locked and I was safe, I got into bed and I tried to ignore the shrill cries of the woman outside. In the morning, I contacted the police and asked about how long the woman would remain in custody, just in case they had just let her out. They said that, since she really didn't settle down till about 5 a.m., and she was being violent, she stayed in the cells that night, and she'd be checked later today. So in other words, the person who came to my door definitely wasn't the person who they arrested. Now that I think about it, the voices were similar, but not identical. They had the same kind of raspy, stale, stilted manner. and quality to their voice though. I had a meeting at work that morning. I had to go, but I was scared to leave. I pulled myself together though, and I timidly headed out the door. There were loads of dirty footprints all over the bottom half of my door. It looked as if it had been repeatedly kicked. I guess that was probably that banging sound. I took some photos and I headed off. When the police came in the evening, I showed them the door and my photos. Once again, when night came, I heard the voice of a woman out there calling for someone to give something back to her. The police told me that they thought there was a group of these suspicious people in the area. They weren't able to provide me with a reason or a motive for their actions. That was it for me. I stayed with a friend the following night. The police were watching us that night. They patrolled, both outside my home and my friend's home. They seemed a lot more concerned at that point. It was almost as if they weren't explicitly telling me I was being targeted, but kind of giving me that impression. They didn't find anyone that night though. After that night, I stayed another night with my friend as the police patrols continued, but I never heard that voice again. Something weird did happen 3 days later. I got a call on my home phone and I heard a voice muttering something unintelligibly. It was strange. I didn't put my number in the phone book. Usually I don't answer calls from withheld numbers, anonymous numbers, etc., but my niece was staying over that night and she picked up the phone. When she answered the phone, she said that she heard nothing but silence, and that was when she handed it to me, and as soon as I said, "Hello," a voice started muttering something angrily to me. I'm kind of glad I didn't understand or hear what the voice said. I don't need to know what kind of curses or threats were attempted to be spat down the phone at me, because whenever I think about that voice I heard outside and the banging at the door, I get the idea that there might be more of these cult-like people who are seemingly intent on harassing me. I get really scared at that thought. I have racked my brain and I cannot think of a person, male or female, I have fallen out with, been in a relationship with, or even irritated, who I thought could be capable of doing this to me. I'm glad it's all over with. I really am. Well, I consider it all over with, since I haven't had another incident for a while. If anything happens, I'll post it here. Hi, Jay here. There have been no further posts by the original poster. This happened a long time ago, when I was in college. I was renting this one-bedroom dump of an apartment. It was tiny. The area wasn't too bad though. It was in a really quiet residential place. Despite it being small, I didn't have much else to complain about. Well, that was until all the activity started. Weird things began to happen. For example, I woke up one morning to find a meter-long black hair in my mouth, and I would occasionally hear a baby crying in there in the dead of night. I regularly suffered with sleep paralysis and horrible nightmares. I lived in room 101, and I couldn't believe that I was the only person living in the block. It was quiet. Real quiet. Occasionally someone would move in, but before long they would move out. I mean, there could have been other residents for all I know. I just remember that all the apartments were pretty much empty all year round. On the upside, it meant that there were always places to park and I could play my guitar as loud as I wanted to, without getting any noise complaints. I noticed that there were 4 apartments on the ground floor, but only 3 doors. I don't know why it was like that. I tried to figure it out. The apartments are shaped like the capital letter L. So from my apartment, 101, up to 103, the doors are side by side. But there was a wall where apartment 104 should have been. The reason why I thought that there should have been an apartment there was because, like I said, there were 2 floors, and the layouts of the apartments were the same, and there was an apartment 204, above where apartment 104 should have been. It was as if the doorway to apartment 104 had been covered by a wall. I tried looking in from the back. All of the apartments in this building had balconies. There were lots of artificial plants in 104's balcony, so you couldn't see anything from the outside. It drove me mad, and I really wanted to know what was in there. I thought about it a lot, and I arrived at the conclusion that all the creepy goings-on must be related to that walled-up apartment. I couldn't get in there, or even have a look in there, so I kind of just lost interest. But it was quite fun to imagine what might be going on behind that walled-up apartment. I ended up living there for about 4 years, not by choice I might add. College is expensive. But I finally finished college and I began my job search, and after a few months of employment, I found a bigger and better place and prepared to move out. The timing felt right, as the building had just changed hands and there were ongoing renovations. The day before moving day, I was cleaning my room and I went outside to throw out the garbage. I opened the door to head out and I looked down the hall to see the renovations and how they were going. They were working on apartment 104, and they were breaking down the wall. I guessed that the new owner of the building wanted to maximize his income by adding another apartment. Smart move. I threw out the garbage and headed back to my apartment. After some more cleaning, I headed to the nearby convenience store to grab something to drink. The wall was completely demolished by now and I could finally see inside. Better still, it seemed like the renovation crew were taking a break. I was thinking that this is the moment I finally find the cause of all the activity in the apartments, the sleep paralysis, the crying baby, all the spooky things. My heart was pounding in my chest as I approached. I saw inside the apartment, and it was covered in so much dust and soot. It was clear that no one had set foot in there for years, maybe even decades. I could see the main room, and the layout was pretty much the same as mine. The walls were black. I thought it was more dust, but I took a closer look and noticed that there was something else written on the walls. The letters were very small, but they were there. I think the original color of the wall in that apartment would be white, because my walls were white, and the letters were white. Some of the letters were black though, and they were almost imperceptible to the human eye. I got a really bad vibe from that place, yet I couldn't look away. It was like I was staring at something more than just letters on a wall, like there was something else in there. You know how you can look out at a body of water, and your mind conjures up the idea of a deadly animal beneath the surface, like a shark or a crocodile. It was like that. My eyes were glued to the wall and to those letters. I couldn't make out what they said because they were written so small, and I didn't want to go in there. It was all in hiragana. On the right side of the wall, I was able to make out some letters. Masahiruya. It's not a word. I have no clue what it means, although once I read that word, I started to feel sick. It was time to leave. I wanted to be in a place where there were people, so I headed back to the convenience store. I pulled myself together after a while, and then I headed home. It was my last night in that building, and I'm glad that it went by without incident. The next morning, as I was putting my moving boxes in the car, I saw the entrance to room 104 was now covered up by some sort of tarp so people couldn't look in there. I started to wonder if the renovation crew discovered something more sinister than I did. About 2 years after I moved out, I kind of forgot about the place. Well, that was until I was driving past my old neighborhood on a recent day off. I decided to go take a look at the old place for nostalgia's sake. I was really curious to see if anyone was living in 104. I drove slowly along the back road, which the balconies faced, by the car park. I almost crashed when I saw something pretty shocking there. 104 was walled up again. The plastic plants were back so you couldn't look in. Everything was how it was before. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was like I was looking into the past. I looked at my old place, and someone was living there. Laundry was hanging out on the balcony. All the other rooms were still vacant though. I mean, there weren't even curtains in the windows. I have so many unanswered questions. What happens in that apartment block? What was the meaning of those words? Because whatever the renovation crew and the owner discovered in room 104 made them put everything back the way it was. What did they see in there Does the person living in my old place have the same sleep paralysis issues? And do they hear the same strange noises as I did? One thing I do know is I won't be going back there. I feel so creeped out by that building.